So, old school academic, right? When you talk about, the academics of old and what academia could be, what it should strive to be, what a lot of people see as the true purpose and function of the university in a healthy society, Norm Finkelstein is an example of a true academic, right? Old school in that
Yeah.
way. Notice he did not parlay his knowledge and wisdom and intellect into a life of riches. Quite the opposite. His academic integrity, his intellectual and moral integrity has cost him dearly in his life,
Yes. Yes.
right? To the point where he was talking with us. I'm not revealing anything personal. When he did his last interview with us, he was talking about how he had to tell his landlord, right? Doesn't even own a house. He rents. He says, the only way I'm leaving this apartment is in a casket, right? So that's the struggle of a guy who actually has moral and intellectual and academic integrity.
Right.
That's where those values actually land you, and they landed him there. But he spoke out on the Katie Halper show in favor of Claudine Gay. Katie put this out as a sort of compilation of his response. There's some edits there because she tweeted this out, and so let's take a look at Norm Finkelstein's defense of Claudine Gay.
What happened to President Claudine Gay, it's the biggest assault on academic freedom in our history. It is unthinkable that a president of a university would be overthrown by big money. You know what Balzac famously said, the novelist, behind every great fortune is a crime. So this billionaire criminal class, if they can determine the president, they can determine every facet of university life. And I've talked to many student organizations, including at U of P and at Harvard, and I've said, your first demand when school resumes, McGill has to be restored. And that should be the first demand at Harvard. Claudine Gay has to be restored. If you don't restore her, you've set a ghastly precedent. You will be the alumni of a generation of students that allowed for the end of academic freedom.
So Norm obviously accused Alan Dershowitz, who we'll be talking about on Rumble a little bit later, of
Friend of
plagiarizing. Show. Yeah, friends of show Alan Dershowitz. He has accused him publicly of basically plagiarizing one of his most famous books. He obviously just wrote a whole book. Well, not a whole book. Half of his last book, which was a very long book, was on academic freedom, was a sort of vigorous defense of the academic ideal, saying that this was, what he said is that this was the greatest assault on academic freedom in history. I'm not qualified to agree or disagree on that. Like I said, it's not really my arena. But he said, you've set a ghastly precedent, and he's right about that. He's right about that. They've now picked off 2 out of these 3 presidents. They're going to come for the MIT president next, I would bet. So what's your reaction to that?
I guess my question would be very much like the presidency of Donald Trump. Actual friend of the show, Matt Taibbi, wrote a great article about Trump after he was elected, arguing that the real issue with Trump is that he's ripping the mask off the ugly reality of American empire. Did the billionaires and the donors not run these institutions before, or have these events simply ripped the mask off that underlying reality? Were you able to run afoul of the donors before? Like, it was always well known that a big part of the job of deans and college presidents was to suck the ball sacks of the donors, to kiss up to the donors, to get money out of the donors. So what changed? It's just that something came up that was so in opposition to the ideological agenda that has been pushed in these universities for decades. It just created too much cognitive dissonance to turn on a dime and side with the settler colonialist project, when for decades the billionaires were very content to allow this ideology to spread as a virtue signal. They never expected it to be actionable in the modern world. They thought they would just endlessly litigate past crimes of the West. They never thought they were going to be on the wrong side of a modern day crime that is essentially of the West, whatever the geographical placement of Israel. It's a Western puppet state. Um, and this is the result. They don't have more power than they ever had before. It's just that this event occurred that was so at odds with a lot of the academic reputation and central premise of a lot of these people's careers and a lot of the students' genuine belief system, that it created an open rift between the donor class and the people that they have long had control over. It just wasn't an issue because it wasn't a conflict for the people who were benefiting from their largesse until now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with all that. It is striking to see a guy like Norman Finkelstein, who obviously takes the plagiarism charge very seriously when it's applied more broadly, seems to be defending her even amidst what seems to be a pretty credible accusation of at least borderline plagiarism. I mean, in the Washington Free Beacon article, the person, I forget what the guy's name, Cannon, I forget what the guy's name was, who she supposedly lifted the material from, said that this isn't plagiarism. It looked pretty close to me, but he's still sticking up for her. Maybe it's because he sees the severity of what's going on and the
Even
reason
the
behind the witch
NPR
hunts,
article,
right?
if indeed it was NPR, said very often victims of plagiarism will give a pass to the person. Yeah, you're fucking being nice. Like, yeah, it's all right. You took a few sentences.
Yeah, and,
Whatever.
a lot of
It's
people
like,
do it themselves. It's
yeah,
a lot more
yeah.
common than you might think. We were talking off the air before we went live about how AI is going to uncover a lot of plagiarism because you could just do an AI scrub of one document versus another, and you'll find a lot of similarities.
Right.
I'm telling you, it's a lot more common than a lot of these people who
Oh
are
yeah,
upset about Claudine
a lot
Gay
of
wanna
people
admit.
are about to be embarrassed by AI doing examinations of their work and having this vast database to compare similarities to. I think Norm is looking at the principle. Knowing Norm's work, I think, as well as we do at this point, there is absolutely no way he has a shred of academic respect for Claudine Gay. Absolutely no way. Not only on the basis of plagiarism, but on the basis of her academic work. There is no way Finkelstein would support the area of academia that she is specialized in. We know this, right? He wrote an entire book attacking the school of thought that she's coming out of, which is very DEI. He's defending her on the principle. If you let these billionaires get rid of her, there's no end to it. I think that's the entirety of what he's looking at.
And on the motives of the process, it's like, if the FBI executes a search warrant on your home, even if they find something incriminating, if it comes out that that search warrant was obtained, for ill motive or for ill reason, illegitimately, you would defend the person, even though they might technically be guilty of what they're being accused of. This was an illegitimate process of going after them.
That's a good way to put it. I'm sure that's what this is based on. He's rejecting her firing on principle.
Please clap.